So unfortunately, we'll have to go throughout. Lawrence Fayetteville gas commission. I'm going to do this very quickly. Normally we go through a lot of regulatory process, environmental, plus economic benefits, plus what the commission's done relative to leasing activity and how we regulate that. I've tried to focus everything pretty much tonight quickly on environmental issues that we deal with, as well as other state agencies. I'll try to keep that focused in that manner. Our mission as a regulatory agent for oil and gas, we look at the development of oil and gas to maximize the recovery. That's our statutory function. AEQ, which is an Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, they focus on pollution control issues. We work with them very closely. The Arkansas Gas Commission has 3 offices, just very quickly, so you can see. We have Fort Smith office, in Little Rock, and in Aubrey. The numbers on the screen show you how many wells each of those offices covers. There's 4,000 wells in Fort Smith, 4,000 gas wells operated by about 100 operators. 500 wells in the Little Rock area, that's the Fayetteville shale development. About 9,000 wells in El Dorado, those are basically oil wells. The Fayetteville shale, many of you have seen this map before. This is the development area. The dark line is that area most probable for development. The orange areas are where most of the drilling is occurring, is moving out from those areas. And the reason those areas are significant is those areas are along pipelines where the gas can be moved to market. If you can't get the gas to market, you cannot develop the area. There was an area in the eastern part of Arkansas, southeast of Searcy. That was a heavily leased area early on in the play, and that area will not probably be developed. Small development will be in this particular area. Quickly, some
around rubber on the road situations out on our property in Van County. Our property is located in that southern part of Van Buren, which is in a 15 square mile highway park in the southwest rear highway. There's a lot of wells there, and I've tried to think of the most perfect things to say to you as a landowner that I've experienced since this has occurred, and I think you agree. The first contact that I had with anything pertaining to this Fayetteville shale play was 4 years ago when someone came around and wanted to lease the property. Most of the people I know, preponderance of the acreage that I'm aware of at that time is leased for $25 an acre. It's currently over $1,000. That's the lease bonus. Out of ignorance, maybe, or perhaps the timing was not right. That early session of land acquisition or lease acquisition was simply something that we thought probably would never amount to anything, but it did. Then about 3 years later, we got a knock on the door. It was someone from the seismic operation that knocked on the door and said, we'd like to offer you $5 an acre for damages for us to come across the property and do seismic testing. Well, I learned real quick that once you sign a lease, you don't have a whole lot to say about anything on the surface. You can negotiate damages, but you've essentially given up your right to the surface of your property. You own the surface and the mineral rights both. So I've always been very agreeable to that, and so that took place. Well, before the seismic testing was done, I had another knock on the door, and it was a landman in Seco who wanted to explain to me the process to negotiate damages on approximately 5.5 or 6 acres of my property where they wanted to build a pad. They don't take 5 acres to build a pad, but they require approximately 5 acres to get that job done. So that process began. I received about $11,000 for the damages. I didn't give up the land, I just gave them the right to do what they wanted to do. I've heard of a lot higher prices being paid since that time for damages. took the center of a 80-acre field up there in the rolling hills, and for some strange reason, they wanted the easiest spot to drill a pad, and I accused them of that, and they said, no, that's where the geologist says it needs to be drilled. But consequently, I've noticed that most of all the wells in that area have been drilled in open, nice, open, rolling areas and not out in the woods. I have noticed recently that they've started moving out of some of those areas and getting on the hillsides and clearing things and putting in roads. And so, this is my suspicion. I wouldn't swear to that, but it did appear that they wanted the easiest places to drill first within that particular hot spot. Then about the time my first well was completed, just about the time they just about got the horizontal level, I got another knock on the door, and it was a pipeline link. It was DeSoto Gathering. DeSoto Drilling is the one that did the drilling, which is a subsidiary of Seco, and DeSoto Gathering is the pipeline operation. So then we negotiated, so to speak, the process of the pipeline, carried the gas from that well about 2.5 miles away to the compressor station. So that occurred. That well began to produce real quick, and it produced over 3 million cubic feet of gas a day through an 1 3/4 opening, which I find remarkable under natural pressure. And it did that for about 3 months. It produced at that rate. And then when they came back and drilled the second well in that pad, they shut the well down, or they ceased production while they were moving heavy equipment around. There was a surface line that carried the gas from the wellhead over to the separator, I guess you would call it, and then into the pipeline. So they shut that off for a period of time. And every time it came back, one time it came back at 4 million, another time it came back at over 4 million, and then the last time they shut it down, it was down for about a week, I think, 10 days, and it never quite came back that much. But it's still a very good well. During the time that the process was occurring on my property, I had the opportunity to visit with several of the contractors/subcontractors that were involved in the drilling process. The first well that they drilled there, the rig came in, it took about a day. It's called a sputter rig, which they drill with air, and the name on the side of the truck was Rat Hole Drilling. Have you seen that? And that was the name of the company, Rat Hole Drilling. And they go down and they drill, I don't know, maybe 30 feet down or so, and they put in a large casing. I just call it a pilot hole, is what I call it. Then another rig comes in and drills a vertical hole, which one of my wells on that pad was, I think, 2,600 feet, and the other was 3,400 feet. And then my understanding is from the directional folks, it takes about 400 feet to make the bend, to make the 90-degree bend. And I got to sit in the trailer with the Seco company man, in the company trailer that sits up there. And they've got the computers in their trailers, and you can sit there and you can see real time what's going on underground. And they have all sorts of information available to them in real time. And they will talk to the landowner pretty good, but they won't talk to a landowner about somebody else's work. But they were pretty free with the discussion. And I got to see them set up one of the wells. I got to see the fellows that actually go out and lay off, measure out, and set these rigs up. And the different managers that are associated with different components of the drilling and the process. And what's really remarkable, because I was able to go down there about twice a day because I had that option to do that, was the sheer number of different players in drilling one well. It's an enormous number of people and a lot of different components. And there are people who come on that site that aren't actually doing the drilling, but they're there as a technical representative for the equipment that's being used, that they sold to the company or that they leased to the company. And so during that process, I took a lot of notes and I wrote down a lot of things, but I don't know how they can drill a well for $2 or $3 million. I mean, it sort of boggles my mind that they can do it as cheap as they say they do. Because I just don't know how that volume of traffic can come in there and that many people can do that. I visited with some people that had a lot of experience. I visited with some folks that worked off in the Gulf Coast for the last 20 years. When the Oklahoma, or what was it, the boom of the 80s or whatever, when it went bust, so many people went out of business, so many people lost their jobs. That when Seco came in there, my understanding was they were going out picking up old phone numbers of people that had drilling experience and bringing a lot of people back into the business. And I had a couple of these guys tell me this is the smallest rig I've drilled on in 20 years because the rigs they drill together are off the Gulf Coast and are totally different in staff than what we're drilling with up there. These fellows that do that it's not a family life. I saw so many men that were so fatigued. They work really hard doing that. It's a very intense job. They deserve whatever they get paid, in my opinion. It costs a lot of money to get that done. So I do have a degree of sympathy for the folks that work that intensely to do that job. Whether you agree with what they do or not, they work real hard to do it. Most of the people I met were very good people. We've never had any problems our way. I want to jump in right here now and tell you I sort of wear two hats. Yes, I'm a landowner. Yes, we're going to receive some benefits from this. We've not received our first check yet. I don't know. We're up to nearly 700 million cubic feet of production. One well's been producing since August the 4th. Two other wells have been producing since mid to late October. And they've already produced nearly 700 million cubic feet. It just boggles my mind that much gas can come out of that shale in that short period of time. So I have a personal interest in this, but I'm also a conservation district director in Vanderbilt County. And I want to say this for conservation issues. In our area, we are very interested in having a hard end trying to see that best management practices are used in the Fayetteville shale production. We want to be there to represent our constituents in having best management practices and deal with the environmental impact of this is the enormous impact on the infrastructure, the environment, economically, in every way. It's like driving out across a two-lane highway and all of a sudden you come up on 5 hog farms right in the middle of the road. They don't see things. They're not. It's business. Just like raising hogs is business, or raising cattle, or having a feedlot. And I don't know why I pick on them, but I was in the cattle business a long time, so I think like that. But I think we need to be really educated before we start forming opinions. I'm still trying to get educated to a lot of the impacts that this is having in my backyard. And so I'm anxious to learn about the rest of this Fayetteville shale play also. So I'm down to 15 seconds on this thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stagg. Now, if Derek Lynn and Molly Rowan could come up to the front, please, with their microphones. We'll take questions from the audience and just ask people to speak into the mic. Yes.
I understand that the gas compressor stations produce nitrous oxide a day or
A day.
A day.
A compressor that's under 500 horsepower will use up to 32 ton a day.
I believe nitrous oxide is a percentage. Thank you very much. So aside from this, though, I'm curious about site construction. On January 15th, there were 28 prescribed burns in the state of Arkansas for a total of 2,000 acres. I'm curious if any of these burns are related to the oil and gas industry. clearing land or preparing sites?
You mean that you won't get to start the part?
Pardon me?
Do they start the part?
I understand that very often the energy companies hire different companies out to clear and burn land. So it won't be the energy company actually doing it. It will be another company actually doing the burning.
I wouldn't know what their site preparation tactics would be. That's not regulated. That's between the land. It's a civil issue between the landowner and the law company under the lease. And there needs to be a site cleared. The methodology used would be up to them and the landowner to decide how to do that. The air emissions would be regulated by ADEQ, and if there was one required, ADEQ would require air emissions for those compressors.
Thank you.
Yes, another question.
Yes, Tom, can you hear me? Mr. Stagg, right?
Yes, sir.
You're talking about you'd like to know more about what's happening in like the gas field or where it's going to go. I would love to invite you over to my house. I live by Boonville, part of the other gas field that's been forgotten about. That's the one where I think he just said there was like 4,000 gas wells over there now. You're more than welcome to get a hold of me. Come on over. We'll take you for a ride. You can see what a gas field is.
Okay.
All right?
Right here. Right here.
Mr. Bennett? The picture of the finished gas field in the production phase, your 10-year life, it looked like it was a large area of gravel.
Yes.
I wondered how that's maintained, if it could be planted. I mean, I just picture them maybe spraying herbicides to control plant growth, or...
They do maintain that pad. That's part of the production facility. That'll stay there for the life of the well. It's maintained for several reasons. One, if they come back in and re-fracture the well, possibly get the equipment to stage on. If they come back in to drill another well, they use the same pad. That's part of the facility for the life of the well. And it is maintained with herbicides to protect that from grass growing and things like that.
Question for Mr. Bagel. Sir, about how large is that gravel area that you are just discussing in the other question?
About 2 to 3 acres is where the pad will start. Then that pad you saw is probably somewhat less than that. A lot of it depends on what the company plans to use the remaining pad for. If they want to drill more wells, it will remain larger for a longer period of time than if it's just for one well.
I have a question for Bagel or whoever plans to actually. What's the reclamation process after you said that they have that gravel pad there before, during the lifetime of the well? What happens after?
After the well ceases production or reaches its economic limit, then the well is plugged, all that surface equipment is removed. The rock pad itself is not required under law to be removed. However, landowners sell that to counties for use on road pack. Landowners use it themselves, so it's got a lot of reuse ability for the rock itself. But all the surface equipment, the metal you see, the wellhead, tanks, and all that is removed and gone.
How do they fracture the rock underground? And what does the drilling and the fracturing do to the groundwater and the surrounding wells?
During the drilling process, when they drill a vertical well, the sputter rig that you heard about comes in. They have to set a minimum of 500 feet of surface casing before they drill into the Fayetteville shale, and that protects the surface water. During the fracture treatment, they pump in basically fresh water under pressure into the horizontal portion of the well to exceed the fracture pressure of the rock itself, and that basically cracks it forms fractures. The water is then pumped into those fractures along with the sand, and then when the well is produced back, the water comes out. Sand stays in the fractures to hold the fracture open, so the gas has a pathway to the wellbore. Now, water is then collected at the surface and then moved for disposal. permit to drill the well is $300 through AOGC, Arkansas Oil and Gas Commission, and the pit permit for DEQ is, I believe, $300 also. Two permits for each site.
Two more questions before we have to go to our next speaker, Ms. Mullin. Yes.
I've been told that the oil and gas industry is exempt from EPA rules. Is that true? And if so, what effect does that have on the watershed protection?
There are certain things, they're not exempt from whatever state law the state wants to pass. There are some exemptions through the federal law, U.S. EPA. I believe there's an exemption for stormwater discharge at the federal level using federal requirements. However, the state can adopt whatever requirements it wants, equal those or make them more stringent. So they're not exempt from federal, or they're not exempt from state law, but they are exempt from some certain federal requirements.
Last question before we go to Ms. Mullin, if there will be other opportunities for questions to any of the panelists later.
One more for you, Mr. Bengal. I have a two-pronged question. As far as water use, you said to dispose of water. What are the means for disposing of water? Do you have a rough estimate of how many gallons of water a well will go through during its lifetime?
The greatest use of water, matter of fact, the majority will be during the frac job. There may be 1 to 2 million gallons used in the frac job. Maybe 40 to 60% of that will come back during the initial phase of the well, which is hauled away and disposed of. During the life of the well, that small tank you saw on the rock pad, that collects what water may come out with the gas during its lifetime. It's a dry gas. They make that tank once every few months. It's a very small amount of water that comes back during the productive life of the well.
Thank you very much. As I said, there will be opportunity for other questions later on in the program.
Slide. There are hazards that we're looking at from two categories of sources, I would say. The first category would be chemicals that are used by companies in the various components of the drilling and the production process. Some examples or words you might hear are drilling fluid. We're here in Colorado, and they looked at chemicals or products that are used in Colorado and neighboring states. They looked at 350 products. They found that more than 90% contain a chemical with at least one chemical with at least one adverse health effect. And as you'll see here, most common effects are skin and eye toxicity, respiratory problems itself, or they may just be located beneath the surface. And obviously, once there's disturbance, they may be churned up and may enter the environment in a way they wouldn't have if they were left undisturbed. Some of the things that you find that are naturally occurring could be mercury, arsenic, naturally occurring radioactive materials, hydrogen sulfide, and what are known as the BTEX substances, which are benzene, toluene, ethylbenzene, and xylene. How do these things get into the environment? The next slide is a photo of a pit. This was taken in western Colorado. I think Mr. Bengal mentioned pits. Some places don't allow them, or they may allow only certain types of pits. There are different kinds, and they're called different things in different places, but they're used